All right. The next up on the agenda is the Open Public Meetings Act policy discussion. And before anybody says a word, listen carefully to what Tara, she's going to, or Julie.
Oh, no, that's right.
Yeah, I thought.
Sorry.
Which she's going to tee this up for us, and we're not expecting a huge discussion here, but she's just going to explain some things. Thank you.
So as you know, we've been scrambling, grappling, working hard to figure out how we fit the court order directing us to apply the OPMA to all board action moving forward to the work that we do and to try and reconcile it with our bylaws. At the May meeting, we received a request from Governor Stevens that we be clear about some of the changes that we have made with respect to trying to comply with the OPMA. So that's what your materials, and this is in the late materials, that's what that is an attempt to do, to show you where we see the conflicts with the bylaws and how we've attempted to reconcile that. It's on here for first reading because I originally anticipated that we might have some policy decisions for you guys to make, but as we went through, we didn't think that there were. That being said, if you have questions, disagreements about how we've interpreted it, or would like more information, this would be a good opportunity to let us know what those are so we can come back and make sure that everyone feels comfortable with the approach that we're taking.
This is Paul. I'd like to get in the queue.
Kim got her hand up before you, Paul.
That's fine.
I haven't looked at this in great detail, and not being an expert on it, I don't know that looking at it in great detail would help any. However, there is an expert in the Open Meetings Act in this room, and it's Dan Clark. And I just was going to suggest that maybe we give Dan an opportunity to take a look at this and give his comments and feedback, and maybe give us a report for the next meeting, because he lives and breathes this thing and knows a lot about it.
Thanks, Kim. And I'm looking at Dan, and that Dan can respond to that whenever, Dan. Yeah, okay. Paul Sweigel.
Thank you. So we have an appeal before the Washington State Supreme Court, I believe, regarding the applicability of the Open Meetings Act to the Bar Association. And I'm just wondering, one, is that correct? I think it is. And then secondly, does it make sense to be thinking about or adopting policies before we hear what the court says about that? Because I personally think the court's going to come back and say the Open Meetings Act does not technically apply to us. But I'd like to hear what others think, and I'd like to hear if it makes sense to be talking about policies while we're in the middle of this litigation.
So this is Julie. I believe in your litigation update, it said that our appeal is pending. So it is our request for direct review at the court. It was not opposed by the plaintiff. We have not received any additional word from the court, but yes, you are correct that is pending, and that is part of the reason why what we asked you for today was just sort of a list of items that you'd like more information about.
And I just wanted to add, this is Tara, that we're not asking for action. We're not looking for you to adopt any policies. For the moment, we are subject to Judge Rogoff's order, and we wanted to be transparent and clear about how we're attempting to comply with that order and give you an opportunity, because it's not all black and white. There's some gray here and there's some judgment calls, and to give you an opportunity to ask us questions and raise any concerns that you might have about how we're attempting to comply with that order.
And
Thank
Julie,
you. That's helpful.
And Julie, I want to make sure I understand this correctly, that we can, under attorney-client privilege, we can send you a request. Can you explain something to us?
Yes, and if enough of you have the question, I think in September we can have our counsel representing us in the case come, and we can have a conversation about how we are attempting to comply and how it might affect the case going forward. But I believe that it wouldn't be appropriate to do that right now at this point, but it would be appropriate if you have particular topics. You could let us know what your questions are.
So I know everybody had their listening ears on because they were all nodding to what you just said. So that's great. And is it a question? Yes. And then Alec.
So one of my questions is this allocation of agenda items to a particular period of time, 2:30 we're going to do this, 3:45 we're going to do this. My understanding, and I grant you I'm not an expert, but in trying to read and understand the Open Public Meetings Act, as I've been doing, it doesn't look like we actually have to do that unless it's a public hearing. The public hearing, we have to adhere to a specific date. If we say we're having a public hearing at 3, we have to have it at 3. But it's my understanding from what I can glean that we can just say that we're starting at 9 o'clock and then you just list the agenda items until you don't have to say they take place at a particular time.
So, two things. I'm not aware of any place, and so I'm answering you off the top of my head, so I could completely change my mind later when I go back and read the OPMA, which is one of the difficulties. But one of the things we considered was how to make it possible for the public to actually participate. We have people coming in person, we have people on the phone, and we are not currently having regular meetings. All of our meetings are special meetings, so we can only, or you can only, address items that are on your agenda. So what we tried to do was help out the public to make it clear that if you want to hear these things, you should show up at 9. If you want to hear these other things, you could show up at 1. So that's the reason for the timing. We're trying to make it so that people can come and they don't have to come at 9 and then wait until 5. I actually heard some comments from some people who were here earlier that were sad to find that the things that they were interested in were on the agenda late Saturday afternoon when they'd been here since Thursday. So I think people actually are trying to, they're interested in particular things. And so you're right, it probably is not a requirement, but I think it does help the public be able to attend for items they're interested in.
And I just wanted to add that I think times, I've been sort of cringing as we're all sort of walking around saying like, well, this is because of the OPMA and this is because of the OPMA, and not everything is because of the OPMA. We put times on the agenda because people like to know when things are going to be heard, and it keeps us on schedule. And I think you're right. There is not a requirement under the OPMA that we note all these things. I think the requirement that we're running up against is that we can't take things early once we've noted what time they are, because then, we gave notice that something will be at 1. If we take it up at 11, someone who came at 1 will miss that, and that seems problematic. But if we end up running late, I don't see that as an OPMA issue. And I think you're right. It might make our compliance easier if we had fewer times, but we have tried historically to put times on the agenda so people have a sense of when to show up for what.
Sorry, a quick follow-up question, if I may. So on that point, Tara and Julie, couldn't we, and this might be a presidential policy decision too, but from an OPMA standpoint, couldn't we just say we have citizen or public access time at 9 a.m. or 9:15 a.m.? People can come and comment on whatever's on our agenda that they wanted to comment on. We give them, there's a 15-minute period for them to do that. And then we don't have to set times in the agenda. We just start taking them in the order that they're listed.
So my only comment about that is, if you recall our training where Nancy Cryer said specifically part of the purpose of the OPMA is for the public to see the sausage being made. And so part of the idea behind it is that members of the public can hear your discussion because they're interested in it. And so that's actually part of the reason for the timing.
All right, Alec.
So I was just curious regarding the part, I think it's on page 101, and this has to do with committees. because I know we're trying to wade through this. So, for example, I know there were some questions with the diversity committee regarding what it needed to do with the OPMA, meaning this is the policy-making entity, and the diversity committee, one rarely even makes recommendations or seeks action by the board, but two, it doesn't usually, if it's going to do an action, it still has to come to the board. So is there any definitive word, and I was trying to understand the graph here on committees and what they have to do to comply with OPMA.
So the current information you have says that we are still walking through that determination with each of the committees, and that is an ongoing process.
Nancy. No, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
And my comment was actually very similar to that, because our section has been struggling with what are our obligations and hearing very divergent points of view. So at some point, we would appreciate something that helps us, because recently we had to replace one of our appointments between meetings because someone became ill and had to resign. And the governor, the Washington State governor, needed a replacement before a certain meeting. And so we were trying to do that via email and deciding if we needed to do it on a conference call or whether we had to do anything at all. So any guidance down the road would be helpful.
All right.
We did it by email.
All right. You'll find out if that was an error later. All right, Tara. Okay. You have one more point there, Kim?
I just want to reiterate again, I think it's important that Dan Clark looks at this and gives his feedback.
All right, perfect. And I also want to acknowledge and order a copy of the expedited copy of the transcript, because I'm pretty sure Carla acknowledged what she said, presidential policy decision. And I've always known that existed, and it slipped by Rajiv. I want him to remember those words, presidential policy decision. Okay, that's going to be good for future reference. All right.